And I hope you're enjoying your meal. It looks so good. I can't wait to eat some wash, and it seemed to itch you or give you problems because of maybe the chemicals in it or whatever. How many of you have issues with most bath wash? Yeah. Okay, well, it's a simple way you can create your own. It's very economical. So, this is a simple way, and this is what I use when I learn how to do this myself. I don't buy the bath washes in stores. I just create my own. And that's what I'm going to show you, a simple version of that. So this is, you can get this at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. It's by Dr. Barnes. You can do so many things with this, from creating your own bath wash to face wash to you can wash your hair. This wash can cover everything you need to do. And that's why I like it. I wash my hair, I bathe with it, wash with it and everything else. And so even wash your clothes, you can even wash your clothes with it. It's just amazing. So praise the Lord. But what I'm going to show you, real simple, is, let me borrow this one. With most of the bath washes you create, it's best to use distilled water because that's less chemicals that's added or, in the water as it is. So get you some distilled water. This is not distilled, but that's best to use. Okay? So we're going to put about, I don't think I brought my other measuring cup. We're going to put, here I'll just use this one. If I want to make one this size, you can buy your individual pump. You can buy a pump, I think, at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, and it will fit on here. And you just add your pump, put it in the shower, and all you have to do is pump a little on your sponge and bathe. Okay? So if I'm going to create one this size for me too, because it doesn't take much soap, so I will add about a cup of this. Okay, here's your cup. Now, if I'm a person that maybe you have skin issues and sometimes your skin is itchy, so what I add to mine is tea tree oil. So you can add however many drops. Usually I add 10 to 20 and sometimes 40, depending on what size you're creating. So I'm going to add about 10 drops to this. This is tea tree oil. Now, someone can tell me, what is tea tree oil good for?
Everything.
I can't hear you.
Antibacterial or something like that.
Antifungal, antibacterial, anticoagulant, yeah, all of these wonderful things it does for you. So I added the tea tree oil. I'm going to stir this in. Now you can add peppermint, you can add whatever you choose. Now if it was a man and he wanted to create his own, some of the choice herbs for men are cedarwood, cinnamon, frankincense, this is vanilla, frankincense, and lavender, okay, and tea tree oil, of course, because tea tree oil helps with, any kind of fungus or whatever. So men can create their own brand of bath wash or hair wash or whatever. Okay, so that's what we have. And you would, if you have your bottle and this empty, recycle one that you have, and all you have to do is get a funnel, put your funnel in and pour it into and add water. I'm going to add this to here. This is probably, it's probably about a half a gallon. Okay, so you just stir it up. Okay, and if you think it's not going to lather up for you, believe me, it will. Not because it's got enough there, but there's plenty of lather already on my hands, and I'm going to use a tiny drop of a little bit of that. And this will bathe, you will feel it, your skin will tingle, like refreshing, and because this has so many different herbs already in it, you don't have to go and buy and add so many herbs. It comes with all the herbs already distributed into the product. And you can store this in the shower, just sit in your shower with a pump on it, and every day you wash your hair, shower, take your bath, and you will feel so refreshed. The children can use it, you can use it on babies. So it has multiple purposes, okay? So was that a simple recipe? And you'll be surprised when you try it, how well it is. This will last you for months and months, because you're only using a cup. And this will last you for months. You know, when I create mine, it's like 2 or 3 months, and you're barely, because it doesn't take much. And believe it or not, I wash my clothes with it. If you have something you just want to wash out quickly, it will wash it out. Okay. And the same thing is good for hand sanitizer. In your bathroom, if you need some hand sanitizer, hand wash from the company, just put it in the little bottle. It serves multiple purposes. Okay, now, we're gonna create now. What time of the year is it? Summer coming, and so it's gonna be humid, it's gonna be hot, and so all of us perspire. No matter who you are, you perspire. And it's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. So you don't wanna stop you don't want to stop it. Some people use deodorants that have a lot of aluminum and different things to try to keep from sweating. Your body needs to sweat, because when you're sweating, you're what? You're eliminating toxins. And so it's a good thing. But you want to be able to have something you can use. You don't want everyone running from you. So you still want to take care of that toxin, even though it's got to come out, okay? So we're going to create a deodorant, and you don't have a recipe for this, but you can write it down, or like she said, you can even go back on and take your time to write it down. So here we go. There's 2 kinds we can create. I'm going to tell you what the man's deodorant is. You can write that down, and I'll tell you, we're going to create the ladies' version of deodorant. And this is called, people don't like to say, oh, do you have any deodorant? They want to be so formal, like they said, oh, do you have any pit paste? It's like, excuse me, pit paste is what a lot of them are calling it. It's a paste that you create, and they said, oh, can I have a little of your pit paste? To me, that sounds, but anyway, that's the time in which we're in. Okay, this is an antibacterial pit paste. Okay, let's get started. Now, this is the woman's version because we're using herbs that are really delicate, and women love the different type of herbs here. So, if you're creating a man's, I'll tell you the herbs that you will use in that as well. We're going to start out with coconut oil. This is a half a cup of coconut oil. Who can tell me some of the benefits of coconut oil?
Antibacterial.
Antibacterial. What else? It's very delicate for the skin. It's not going to cake up your skin like some oils. And when you put this deodorant on, some people panic because it's oil, and they say, "Oh, it's going to get all over my clothes." You won't. This will not. It's going to absorb right into the skin, so you won't have to panic. Unless this deodorant is not created for you to put like you only need a little small amount. And so if you put too much, of course it may stain, but you won't need much of this. So we're starting out with the coconut oil. Coconut oil, like you said, is antifungal, it's antibacterial, it helps to cut the bacteria.
It will melt at room temperature.
It will melt, so what you want to do is if you want to keep it in a cool place if possible, because it will melt, but in the winter, it's perfectly fine to leave it out. But if you're not in it will melt, yeah. Okay, here you got your coconut oil, yeah. Here. Now the next ingredient we're going to put is tapioca. It's amazing the things that we cook with. You can turn around and use them as for different herbs and body treatments that you're doing. Tapioca is the next one. We're adding a 4th cup of tapioca.
Is it a powder?
It's a powder. Same thing that you make tapioca pudding, but it's a powder. Okay, the next ingredient is arrowroot powder. And instead of cornstarch, you're using arrowroot. Yeah.
How much of the?
That was a 4th of both. A 4th of arrowroot, a 4th of tapioca.
Like a 4 to 1?
A fourth cup.
Oh, a 4th cup, okay.
Okay, and the next ingredient is baking soda. Now, some people have reactions to baking soda. You don't have to use it, but baking soda is good for cutting back to help with bacteria. Okay, so this is a 4th cup as well. And it helps with moisture and all of that, your baking soda. Okay, your next ingredient is, I'm using kaolin clay. You can use bentonite or a green clay, but I'm using kaolin clay. I have a mixture actually here of kaolin and bentonite. This is a fourth as well. Everything seems to be a fourth in this recipe, so it makes it easier. Okay, everything except, now the last ingredient that we're adding is called zinc oxide. We're not using aluminum, we're using zinc oxide powder, and this is 3 teaspoons. And this helps with, instead of your shirt getting all red underneath, and it helps with absorption. Okay, so it's not gonna block you from getting that, from perspiring, but it's gonna help with the absorption of it. So you're not staining your clothes and, it helps with that. Okay, now we have all of this in. Oh, and the last one I have here is magnesium powder. Now magnesium, everyone needs magnesium, whether you get it in a magnesium oil or a tablet magnesium, your vitamins, or this is magnesium powder. That was 1/4. Everything is 1/4 except the zinc oxide. You have to order that. It's going to find it actually. Okay, and now if you have a hand, oh, I don't want this one. I want mine. Here it is. If you have a hand mixture. Okay. We are just going to try to blend it some now. I think I need to probably do a little more. I didn't want to get it too loose because it would melt. But it might need a little more coconut oil in it. The more you work with it, though, okay, now I'm just going to get my oils in here that will help it. So here we're going to use, this is the men's version, so we want the women's. I see it. Okay, on the women's you're going to have lavender, 10 drops of lavender. That's my lavender. Okay. If you put a few more, that's okay. It's better, it's beneficial. Okay, then you will add 10 to 15 drops of cinnamon. Oh, that's for the men. I don't want cinnamon in this one. I want bergamot. That's what I want. Bergamot. And that is 10 drops. You can add how much you want, but normally. Okay. And then you have lang-a-lang. Lang-a-lang is one of the main essential oils that women really love because combined with others, it gives it kind of a nice, delicate smell.
Oh, lang-a-lang.
Lang-a-lang. Y-L-A-N-G. You repeat it twice, lang-a-lang. Okay, and the last one is tea tree. Now remember, tea tree is antifungal, antibacterial, so I'm going to add about 10 or 20 drops. Okay. Now, we have all of our, now you can, like me, you can add some vanilla to it if you want to combine that with the lemon. I'm going to add some to it. This is about 10 drops too. I like the smell of vanilla. Okay, now let's try again. I might have to do some ask one of them to look in the cabinet, see if any more coconut oil. We have some in here. Okay, it's okay then. We'll get it. And anyway, I wanted you to see, this is just, I'm gonna add when I get in the kitchen, I'll add a little more, but it's coming around. This is what your ingredient, I thought I had 2 minutes. This is what your ingredient, this is what it will look like when it's finished. And all you need is just a little pinch. Now normally you want to have a little spatula. They have these little spoons that look like the little spoons, taster spoons. It's good if you have that where you're not contaminating the field each time when you use your deodorant. So it's best to get you some of those little sticks or the little spoons. And all it takes is a little bit. And when you put it on under your arm, it's gonna look like this, and it's gonna absorb right on into the skin. In a matter of 3 minutes, before you know it, this is gonna absorb right into your skin. And you should have no problem with a lot of perspiration and whatnot. For this summer, you should do very well. Okay, and this is a way you can create your own without the luminance, without a lot of chemicals in the deodorant, okay? Well, that's the end of this, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Bless you. All about the food that you're eating while Tess is getting her demo ready. Sure.
Could you ever go over the ingredients real fast?
Yeah,
I think I missed a couple.
Okay. Okay, for the women, you have, let me give you the men too, I said y'all ever do that. The women, you have a half a cup of coconut oil, a 4th cup of tapioca, a 4th cup of arrowroot, a 4th cup of baking powder, baking soda, I mean powder, it's a powder, but it's a baking soda powder. Okay, a 4th cup of kaolin clay, or you can mix it.
Or bentonite.
Or you can mix them. A 4th cup of magnesium powder, 3 teaspoons of zinc oxide. Now that is the recipe for the deodorant. Now the oils, you have lavender 10 drops, bergamot 10 drops, ylang-ylang 5 to 8 drops, tea tree 5 to 8 drops, or 10 or whatever you want to add. Now the men, if you want to do one for your husband, this is the recipe for the husband, the same recipe, only the difference is, and by the way, this recipe is in my natural remedy book, so it is copyrighted. But anyway, you may use it for yourself. It's 10 drops of clove for men, 10 to 15 drops of cinnamon, 6 to 8 drops of cedar wood. Am I going too fast? And 5 to 8 drops of lavender, 10 drops of tea tree. Okay, and that's for the men's fragrance deodorant. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what other questions are there in general about any topics that you guys want to talk about nutrition while we're waiting for Tess? Jen, can you check on Tess and make sure she knows we're waiting for her? Thank you. Anybody have any questions? We've got a big group here. So we want to make sure to give Dr. Teske plenty of time.
Got a question back here.
Sure. Okay, Elaine.
Hi there. You know, I've missed a couple of sessions. Have you done anything on raw vegan recipes?
We haven't done a lot of, raw vegan, we haven't focused on that. We have done some raw recipes, but it hasn't been like our emphasis. If that's a demand and people are really interested in that, there are lots of things that we can do. So how many of you are interested in raw vegan, learning more about raw vegan foods? Yeah, we can do that next year. We can easily work more of that into our program. Thank you for asking. Okay, Tess, we all hooked up here. Liz, have you Sakari? At the end of our evening, we're going to acknowledge all the people that, like I said, have been helpers. We have had so many wonderful helpers over the past season. We just appreciate every single helping hand.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Did everyone enjoy their meal?
Yes,
What was your favorite part of the meal?
eating.
Someone said eating, okay. Everything. Okay, tonight we... Okay, can everyone hear me? No?
It's gonna, it has to be up higher.
Okay.
Bring it up higher, closer
Bring it
to
up
the
higher.
mouth.
Let me, okay. All right, so everybody's enjoying themselves tonight?
Amen.
Okay, we have a special treat for you. So Kari is Vietnamese, and she is the one that prepared these delicious spring rolls for us. Did you guys? Oh, Cambodia, sorry. Close enough. Okay, she can correct me. So tonight we used what we call, and so Kari's going to be demoing how to prepare these spring rolls. We use these rice paper that you can find in your local grocery store. And basically what she's going to be doing is she's going to put it in some water, submerge it in some warm water, and you'll notice the consistency will change in a few minutes. Now what I love about this recipe is that it's very versatile. You can put any of your favorite vegetables, and you can also add fruits. This is a wonderful way that you can get all your nutrients. You know, a lot of us are malnourished. We do not get our nutrients. Do you agree with me?
Yep.
America is malnourished. So now what she's going to do, go ahead. We're just going to add a little bit of spinach. So Kari is an expert at this. It took us 2 seconds just to make a spring roll. And then we're going to use some basil. And some red pepper. And of course, again, you can put any vegetable you like. And you don't want to make it, you don't want to pack it too much because then it'll be difficult to wrap it. You'll have it breaking out and you don't want that. And we're going to use cucumber, we use a little carrot, and we're going to use some avocado as well. See how colorful it is, and the more colorful your meal is, the more nutritious it is, because different nutrition comes in each one of those colors, believe it or not. God is so amazing. He knows exactly what he was doing when he created all our food. And now she's going to wrap it tightly as possible, about twice. You wrap it twice, and then you fold it on the edges as tight as you can, and then you just continue rolling. See how easy and quick that was? There's a great philosopher, Hippocrates, who once said, "Let food be your medicine, and let medicine be your food." What a wonderful way, quick and easy and very nutritious. Thank you. Thank you, Sakari. And now I'm going to demo for you the dressing that you use. Oh yeah, I can use that. Thank you. We're gonna demo the dressing real quick. Very, very simple. Who can read off the ingredients for the dressing?
Almond ginger sauce.
Almond ginger sauce. Okay, we're using lemon juice. We have almond butter, Bragg's amino acid, toasted sesame oil, fresh ginger, garlic, onion, maple syrup, and salt. Did you guys enjoy this?
How much salt?
Pardon?
How much salt?
A half teaspoon.
Okay.
A half a teaspoon of salt.
That got left off our printed sheet.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And if you like more garlic, if you like more ginger,
So we could say to taste. If you want more.
exactly, to your taste.
If you don't want so much.
You don't want to overdo it with your salt. You can always make it ahead of time and put it in the refrigerator. And also, what I forgot to tell you about the spring rolls is that you want to eat it at least the same day that you make it. The consistency would not stay the same if you leave it for, let's say, a couple of days. So you want to eat it as soon as possible. And it's also a good principle for any of your foods that you make. You don't want to, unless you freeze it to preserve that energy, the nutrition, it's better to eat it as you make it. Okay, this is a mess. Okay, and in 2 minutes you have your sauce. Did you guys enjoy that? All right, I encourage you guys to try some of these recipes. They're so easy and they're very, very healthy for you. We're not just demoing for demo's sake. We want you to try these at home, okay? Get some nutrients in your bodies and stay healthy.
We asked where do we buy these?
You can get those at St. Mart. And you can get those also at the Asian stores, the Asian market.
Like R&M?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much,
Thank
Tess.
you.
Thank you so much. Good. Good timing. We want to give Dr. Teske plenty of time tonight. Dr. Teske is an emergency room physician with Adventist Health. He works out of Hanford. He's worked for many, many years in prevention. He's traveling around the world teaching reversing diabetes and natural lifestyle. And he's got just a load of experience. He loves to study visions and keep up on science. So we're very, very happy to have you here, Dr. Teske. Thank you so much.
Careful. And I'll put your eye out.
Yeah, next lecture will be on head injury. Okay, welcome. It's a privilege to be here again. Going to talk about a very real problem, Alzheimer's disease. It's affecting a large amount of people. There's been a huge increase over the last few decades in the incidence of Alzheimer's. It is really increasing. Most diseases can make you miserable, but Alzheimer's takes away who you are. When you start losing your memories, at first it's inconvenient, and then pretty soon it gets to the point where you just, you aren't you, and what's the point of living when you're not there anymore? Everyone knows a cancer survivor. No one knows an Alzheimer's survivor. Once it starts coming, it's in just that inevitable decline to the point of, and you always die from it. And that's been the truth for as long as we've known. However, God is good, and science has opened up some light into that. There is some specialists now in their scientific research and looking at the causes of stuff, have actually, by taking the bigger road and looking at the multifactorial picture rather than the usual pharmaceutical approach of one drug to fix one problem, have actually come up with some protocols now, and they are getting excellent results of being able to stop. You can prevent Alzheimer's, you can actually stop it, and amazingly, they are even reversing Alzheimer's, something that's never been done before. You know, this has been the truth forever, but that paradigm is gonna change. And I'm gonna share with you tonight briefly, we got a huge amount of literature. I'm gonna give you the science to understand what Alzheimer's disease is and understand why a broad approach to it is actually very effective. And we'll share with you the results, the references and stuff, where to go if you feel you're starting to get a little change and you want to do something, or you just want to prevent it, or maybe you know someone that is already suffering from it. Of course, the far advanced stages of Alzheimer's, I don't believe are reversible, but they have been getting some very good results in people that are definitely diagnosed and having functional problems, you know, with daily living and loss of memory, loss of function, loss of the usual things they do, and getting all that to come back. So it's really, there is hope there where there wasn't any before. There's really three stages here that we are used to, they use. These are the medical terminology. The first is subjective cognitive impairment. That is where you notice things aren't quite the same as they used to be. You can't find that word. You can't quite come up with things. You're saying, hey, I used to be able to do that really easy, and now I can't find that, I can't do that. You're noticing that. And yet, we did some cognitive testing that we do for cognitive functioning, you would pass all the tests. So that's subjective. Look, you can tell the difference, but it's not measurable objectively. You're easy to get by and with life with everything. The next stage, mild cognitive impairment, goes beyond that, and there's some common standardized tests that test the various functions of the brain with some questions and testing and things. And when we start to see some deficits there where the cognitive function is not up to what we would consider a normal or standard cognitive function there, we call that mild cognitive impairment. Now, the difference between mild cognitive impairment and actually a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, this has progressed to the point where it is now interfering with the activities of daily living. It's not just I can't find my keys. I'm not sure how to drive the car anymore, which button does which. So one day she went in the bathroom, she couldn't find the light switch, was able to turn it on. It progressed to the point you need help, dressing, help tying the shoes, help doing things. It just goes on. And of course, there's that loss in the relationships because you don't remember who they were anymore. And so we've now gone into Alzheimer's disease. But all these definitely, and even down into here, where we are getting some significant function, as long as there's not been really, really severe loss of brain tissue here, we are actually turning these around and getting some excellent results. This is the appearance of a normal brain here on this side. Here you see the appearance of a fairly advanced Alzheimer's brain. Notice the complete loss of tissue there where you've lost the brain. Here we've taken a brain, here the Alzheimer's brain on this side, a normal brain here, done a coronal section of it. Here's what a normal brain looks like when you cut across it. Here you see the tremendous amount of loss of brain tissue there that comes with Alzheimer's disease. Here is a PET scan. This scan is actually, by color, we're measuring glucose uptake, activities of neurons here. And so the normal brain, you'll see a really good activity level here. All these cells are firing and thinking and doing all the things that brain cells do. Here's the mild cognitive impairment patient. They're not quite running on all four burners anymore, but they're still getting along in life. And here, the more advanced, we've lost a lot of brain tissue, and there's minimal functioning out in the parts that remain there. Now, if we take and look at the brain on a more microscopic level, there is two things that actually tell us that this patient has Alzheimer's disease, as opposed to some other. There are other neurodegenerative disorders and other things that can cause you to lose your brain tissue. But Alzheimer's disease is the major one that's affecting, and you're gonna see two different things. One, you're gonna see plaques of amyloid beta. It's a protein plaque. These are poisonous plaques that end up destroying brain tissue. They form there. And then you find these neurofibrillary tangles. They're tangles of little proteins. It's a protein called tau, and we'll show you where that comes from. These are actually, you might say, the skeletal remains of a neuron right here, what you're seeing in this picture. This used to be a neuron, and this is the neurofibril tangles here that are left of it. Under a microscope here on the slide here, these are the places where the amyloid plaques are forming here in the brain tissue. Normally there shouldn't be any of this. There's little bits of it spread all through the brain, but it's often congealed in these big plaque formations here. And sometimes you'll see the tangles. Here's one here, those neurofibrillary. They might say the skeleton. Here's a more normal neurons here, but this one, it's dead and gone. These are the little fibers, and we'll see those there, the skeletal remains of a neuron that used to be part of the brain. Now in the artist's conception here, we can see a little more clearly. They've drawn the neurons in the brain without the intervening cells of different kinds, just the neurons you're seeing here, the cell body, and then all of the axons and dendrites, these little projections that go out and synapse with other neurons. And each neuron is sort of like a little computer, and your brain is sort of like a computer network of billions of these little computers all working together to carry on all of the processes that the brain does. And so there's little synapses firing here, where this one connects to this one, and this one to this one. Now in this picture, you'll see the amyloid plaque here that's developed. These amyloid plaques are quite toxic to the neurons. And you'll notice here, this neuron is not normal like this anymore. Notice the little dendrites. See how many there are here? Notice many of those are gone. And even the ones that are remaining are disintegrating. See, they're all tangling and wadding up here. They've disconnected from other neurons. They're not synapsing anymore. And you see, and the neurofibrils are filling up in the body as well. Notice the difference of appearance and shape there. And this neuron is very shortly to be completely dead and no longer a functioning part of the brain. Here's another artist's conception of the same thing. You see here the amyloid plaque that's deposited here, and you'll see all of the little axons and dendrites that were in this area are all disintegrating, dying, pulling back, separating, and even the cells here, as this one is dying. Notice the difference in appearance here between more healthy ones that are a distance away here. And the whole cell is on its way towards cellular death as the proteins break down in there. Here you can see another plaque here starting to affect from here. These plaques form not in every part of the brain. They form primarily in the frontal lobe and then some of the other areas there, but not all the areas. But now, this picture right here, all of those little axons and dendrites that protrude from the cell, here is actually an inside view of one of those little dendrites that was reaching out to synapse with the other. And inside, there are these structures called microtubules. There's multiple ones, but they've drawn one of the microtubules here. And it's made up of, well, these are the tau proteins. These little proteins all tied together to make this little tubular structure right here. And this is the transportation system. And the neurons there send material that's made in the cell body here. The nucleus has the code for it, it's built there, and then there's like little railroad cars that attach onto here, little engines. They take a little bag of material that's manufactured in the cell body, and they just move down this track all the way to the end of that axon, so where it's needed for the synapse at the end there. They're really neat little things. If you ever see how they work, these little engines that run down the track, they have like two little feet. One foot planks down here, and then the other foot reaches in front of it and attaches, and then the other foot, and they just go like that and just run right down that track to the end of the track and deliver the goods. It would take a long time if you just waited for stuff to diffuse down there, and would probably never get there in the concentrations you needed. You know, I'm thinking if we could turn off these front rows of lights here, that screen would be much clearer. And we can still see here. Didn't want to put you in the eye. Now, here is a healthy neuron. You'll see inside the little axon that went out. They show the little microtubules in here made of these with these tau proteins left in there. Now, in Alzheimer's disease, these are damaged. They're disintegrating, breaking down, and what's really breaking down here are these little microtubules. They're coming apart, and these little tau proteins are coming and making little tangles here. And eventually this is all that'll be left in the cell, is these little tangles of these tau proteins. Here you can see some neurons. You can see the amyloid plaques right here. And everything they touch is starting to die and pull back. And as these dendrites and axons are dying, little microtubules in them are disintegrating. You see the tau proteins starting to tangle up and fill up in here. And all of these neurons will eventually die.
Can medicine bring it back?
No, they haven't found a pill yet. They have spent billions and billions, I think over $300 billion, you know, in the last 10 years, and every single study they've done has been a failure. But we're going to tell you something better tonight. This is just a real quick showing that these amyloid beta plaques, the amyloid actually can get inside the cell, and here you see it. Normally, and this is the normal down on this side, the calcium goes in and is going where it's supposed to. Mitochondria are working normally, producing energy. Now, with the amyloid beta in there altering the function, calcium is leaking out throughout the cell, the mitochondria is disintegrating, and it's not producing energy anymore. Here you can see the neurons, you can see this amyloid starting to attach here. These amyloid particles out here attaching, and that's going to cause the disintegration and death of the axons and dendrites of that neuron where they're attaching. So what is this amyloid beta that's creating this and driving the problem there? It's actually a protein that is made in the body and has a normal function. And I'm going to get a little bit of chemistry here, it's going to a little bit, but follow me here because it'll really make a lot of sense once it all starts to come together. The cell is constantly trying to maintain and support all of the synapses out there, but at the same time, there has to be some reorganization and changing, and you also need to remove some synapses. If everything you ever thought and learned went out there, and all you did was grow more synapses, your brain would soon become a tangled, disorganized mess with synapses everywhere, and carrying on thought would become difficult. In the garden, you need to prune bushes and trees to have them work and produce properly. The brain has to be pruned properly to function properly. Maybe a little bit like a sculptor. You know, you've got a block of marble, but you've got to remove material to end up with the structure you want. You know, in the development of your personality and your character, there are things where you will add, but there are things which you will remove. I mean, imagine the case of a severe traumatic incident in your life, maybe exposure to some, you know, horrible violent incident that you had to observe or, you know, were the victim of. Now, if those memories were put in your brain and continued on at that same intensity and were never removed every day for the rest of your life, you would be a most miserable person. But in normal, healthy individuals, those things will dissipate with time, with healing, with grieving, with love, with God's healing. Those things will change and you'll remove those, they'll pull back. And you don't want those connections there at that same level. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that doesn't work quite right. And those synapses stay there and, you know, years later, they are still, you know, a certain sound will trigger it and they've got that same intensity that they did the day that that event happened in their life. The brain needs to be able to do this. So the ability to make synapses and to remove synapses are normal functions of the brain as it organizes and you develop your character, your personality, and memories are stored over time. Those things will be adjusted. And this is one of the messengers that tells the cell when and how to do that. And it's this protein right here, amyloid precursor protein, that is made right here. It's made inside the cell. This right here, the blue line, is the cell membrane. And it's made here, right here. And you can take it with a certain enzyme right here, this alpha right here, cut it right at this point, and you end up with these pieces here. Another enzyme cuts it at these pieces, and now you end up with these 3 pieces. All 3 of these pieces right here are the ones that support synapses, support cellular health, but particularly are supporting the growth and maintenance of these synapses, which would be your memories, you know, motor learning as well as, you know, intellectual learning here. Now the other direction, you can take this same protein and cut it at this point right here, and you end up with these 2 pieces now. You see, we cut it at a different place, so the structure of these will be different. Yes?
Need to back up so we can get the picture. Thank you.
Okay. Stay like in little caves, little
You do
down
that.
here, so
You
I
do
don't
that.
Get out of my. So we cut it right here, and then we cut it once more here, and now we have these pieces here. This red one right here is your amyloid beta. This is the one that that's going to cause the problem here, that create this. So you can cut it this way and support synapses, you can cut it this way and will be destroying synapses. Here's another picture of that same protein. You can maybe visualize it a little better here. This is the cell membrane here, the wall of the cell. This is inside the cell, and this is outside the cell. And here is this protein. It was made inside the cell, but now it is positioned out here. And we could cut it right here, and end up with these, the ones that support it. But it could also be cut here and here, 2 different enzymes. If we cut it in these 2 places with 2 different enzymes here, we end up with the amyloid beta, which is our culprit in Alzheimer's disease. These amyloid betas, you see it building up here, all sticking together and making these big conglomerate plaques here. And these big conglomerate plaques are very toxic to the neurons around them. That's what we saw in the pictures before. Here you can see amyloid beta plaques here on top of the neurons. and they're damaging, here's some like normal looking axons out here, but with these attaching here, they're gonna start destroying the axons, the dendrites, and eventually the neuron will die there. Now, there's another concept that will help us in understanding this. I know this science is kind of deep, but it's really quite fascinating how this all works. There is something called dependence receptors in the body. Now, you know what most receptors, like a receptor for thyroid hormone, the hormone goes into the receptor, and when the thyroid, it's sort of like a key in the lock, and when the key gets in the lock, it turns on certain processes. And when the estrogen gets in the estrogen receptor, it turns on certain processes in the cell. And when the insulin gets in the insulin receptor, it turns on certain processes in the cells. Dependence receptors work the other way around. The key is in the lock, and it's sort of stable, and everything runs fine. But if you pull the key out of the lock, it activates a whole sequence of cellular suicide. We have to have a way to get rid of cells as well to maintain cells. Sometimes we need to remove cells. And so those functions are actually built in so we can remove cells that need to be removed. You know, you need them to die so that new ones can grow. But so here we have these dependence receptors. When the key's in, everything's stable, but if the key gets pulled out, cellular suicide, it's called apoptosis, occurs. Now in this picture right here, the same receptor here, you notice the key is here, but there's something blocking it. Something got in and is blocking it so the key can't actually get in. And so the protein has changed, the mechanisms inside, it is now triggering and activating the sequences that will lead to self-destruction. You ever watch these movies, there's some spaceship and they always push that button, self-destruct in so many minutes? Well, they didn't build that into a spaceship, but anyway, it is built into the cells in your body. They have those, you know, self-destruct sequences here. And all you have to do is pull those keys out of the lock or block the keys from getting in the lock, and you will start those processes of cellular destruction. Amyloid beta can block those dependence receptors. So when amyloid beta starts blocking, we start activating the process of cellular destruction. And when we get these big plaques on here at places and they're blocking these cells are starting the processes of self-destruction and will end up deteriorating. Amyloid beta is anti-tropins that go into the receptors there. Back to reviewing our little picture right here. So we can, if we cut it in these places, we end up promoting axon growth, promoting synaptic and neuronal health. We prevent cell suicide. These pieces actually have receptors. They go onto cells and they do all the good things to help make the cells do what they're supposed to grow good, strong synapses, and the synapses to get better and maintain themselves. On this side over here, if we, instead of cutting it here, once you cut it here, you can't go this way. You have to go one way or the other. You can't go back and forth once it's cut here. But now if you cut it here, knock off this piece, and then cut it here, we now have free amyloid beta there. But there's even, one more thing. Amyloid beta is prionic. You know what a prion is? You know, mad cow disease,
Yeah,
you get a protein and it makes another protein, and suddenly you get this extended damage. Well, amyloid beta, once you make it, amyloid beta can actually cycle back around and actually cleave this here again. So it can sort of create another one of its here. And then that amyloid beta come back, and so amyloid beta not only is cellular destruction, but it's sort of a self-repeating cycle where amyloid beta makes more amyloid beta. So if the amyloid beta just hangs around and stays here, it can make more and more and more, and this situation right here. It's like, yeah, we need to get rid of these cells, let's do it as good as we can, and pretty soon we got so much amyloid beta there, the destruction of that neuron is assured. So, what is going to determine which enzymes are going to cut it and where? You know, we can either use that alpha enzyme to cut it in the right place, or that beta enzyme to cut it in the bad place, and, you know, moving down these two pathways here. Well, there's been a lot of research done on here in recent years, and as you can see, here's our amyloid precursor protein here, and they've just shown the factors that they now know in some way influence and affect which enzyme is going to do what. And as you can see, it's not as simple, this one does this. It is multiple things. Some of these factors will be driving it towards making the alpha one, which will split it in the right way to support neuronal growth. Some of these will be pushing it in the negative way to make amyloid beta to destroy synapses and neurons. And of course, the balance of those is going to determine the problem. But if we got a lot of the negative ones coming in there, that is going to affect it. So now, what are the factors that are going to determine which one of these are going to do what? In other words, what is determining which ones of these are doing what? And that's the real issue. What makes these tell it to go one way or the other? Why has suddenly they've turned on the negative side and it's spinning out of control, destroying the brain, rather than just proper maintenance of memories? Well, a good example to help us understand what's going on is the multifactorial nature of it. The researchers, they now know of 36 different factors that can impact which way we cut up the amyloid precursor protein. So if you want to think of an illustration of a roof, and you've got a lot of holes in this roof, we've actually got 36 potential holes. And they think they've pretty much got it now. It's not there's like hundreds of millions of holes. They pretty much know these are the factors that impinge on it in some way. So there's potential for 36 holes in that roof. Now, if you've got 36 holes in your roof, and you go out and patch one hole, have you solved the problem? No. If you patch two holes, no. That's why monodrug therapists, they're trying to find the drug that will cure Alzheimer's. And so they go find a drug that will do this. And maybe it even is capable of patching a hole. And then they do it in a clinical trial and it's a total failure. Because you can't just patch one hole and turn the process around. It's multifactorial. Now maybe you don't have 36 holes in your roof. Maybe you've got 22 holes in your roof. Maybe you've got 18 holes in your roof. But it's the balance of that. If you've got too many holes, it's going to leak. You're going to get wet. You know, your house is going to get ruined. You know. Now if there's just one or two little holes and everything else is intact, maybe you'd be okay. So it's sort of the balance of all of those. But as we start getting too many holes in the roof, we're going to end up ruining the house inside. All the furniture and everything's going to be ruined because of the holes there. And so we need to look at how can we patch all of those holes? We know what the holes are now. And I'd like to introduce you here to Dale Bresden. This neurology researcher here, a neurologist, has come up. He's looked at all of those, he's tried optimizing them. He is the one that's leading the movement and has actually come up with his name, he calls it RECODE, that's the name for his protocol. And it's a quite extensive protocol to actually look at all of the holes in the roof. And you know, he does things like making sure the nutrition is right, exercise is right, the hormones are just right. We've got certain supplements that help build and support synapses, sleep optimization. We're going to talk about that towards the end of the lecture. The fascinating role that sleep plays in prevention and reversal of Alzheimer's here. Stress reduction here, stress turns many things around here, getting rid of toxins, reducing inflammation. Inflammation in the brain seems to be a key factor in driving this process. If you've got brain inflammation from some source or another, and remember that book that came out a number of years ago, Excitotoxins, it talked about the role of MSG damaging its destructive role in the brain right there, and why it's not good to take MSG here. Here's part of the thing, it's very inflammatory and toxic there because of its role. And supplying to things that actually target certain receptors and tell them to work properly right there. And so what I'm going to share with you is some of the details of his program here and how he does that so that you'll have an understanding of how this disease can be reached. He is doing this and has been doing it now for about 10 years and has been getting excellent results, turning around case after case after case that was really disintegrating and would have been considered hopeless before, has turned them back, brought the memories, the function back, and really brought them back from course, to death right here. So the first step we're going to look at right here, looking for the holes. Okay, so you've noticed some decline, or maybe you brought a relative that has got some significant, steps down this pathway. You can definitely tell something's going on there. You do some cognitive testing, or it's just obvious for life that we're moving down the Alzheimer's path right here. So to apply this principle of plugging all the holes, we've got to find out which holes you've got. And I'm going to go through and just briefly run over how he looks for holes and where he finds those holes. And we'll talk briefly about the kinds of things we can do to patch those holes. And the first one, homocysteine. Homocysteine, if you've got high homocysteine levels, we know that you are at very high risk for Alzheimer's disease. Depending on how high your level is, your risk of Alzheimer's disease is higher and higher depending upon the elevation of your homocysteine level. A lot of doctors are using this right now in measuring for heart disease. If you've got a high homocysteine level, you're at risk for heart disease. And as we go through these factors, you're going to find many of them parallel the risk factors for all of the chronic degenerative disease, heart diseases, diabetes, and arthritis, and many other degenerative disease right here. Homocysteine, you want it less than 7 micromoles here. They'll do a blood test. If it's more than that, then that's a hole. And we want to patch that hole and get homocysteine down below that level. So that's kind of how this works. So we did check your homocysteine level. It was not 7, maybe it was 12 or 18 or more. And we said, okay, so we found a hole. So we're going to patch that hole. First of all, homocysteine is made out of methionine in the food, and it takes several different vitamins here to process it properly, recycle it. So methionine is a self-containing. It's found in beef, lamb, cheese, turkey, fish, shellfish, pork, eggs, dairy.
Question?
Yes?
So is goat cheese okay?
No?
No. And what about beef, eggs? Organic eggs?
There's still eggs. Yeah. So now, remember, this is one of the holes. Now, everybody is going to have some methionine in their diet. It's a matter of too much methionine. So we want to eliminate these high methionine foods. Now, if we test your level and you're under 7, you're okay. But if you've got a high level, you've got to go back and look at these things and say, we've got to avoid these high ones right here. And then we're going to need B12, B6, and folate so we can recycle the homocysteine, turn it into cysteine. The higher your homocysteine level, the more rapidly your hippocampus will shrink. We talked about the hippocampus last time. We were talking about sleep and memory. Remember the hippocampus in the center of your brain, your short-term memory? Everything that happens during the day goes into your hippocampus. And then at night during sleep, you start storing the important things you want to remember it more permanently. And you can clear out and delete the stuff you didn't really need to clutter your brain with that you were aware of that day. But you can actually do an MRI where they do a volumetric and what are the volumes of the different parts of the brain, and you can watch the hippocampus in these Alzheimer cases shrink way down. And people with Alzheimer's have a very shrunken hippocampus. And there's a direct correlation. The higher the homocysteine level, the more rapidly the hippocampus is shrinking. So there's a hole, you know, it's a blood test, we can find it, we can measure it, and we can patch that hole. Now you notice there are several vitamins that helped in that, as well as having roles of their own, vitamin B6, B12, and folate, where they're important for recycling the homocysteine so we don't have too much of it. Deficiencies in B12 and folate can cause anemia and dementia on their own. B12 is real important in the DNA of the cells and what it does there. Again, blood tests can measure these. We can measure your vitamin B12 level, we can measure your folate level, we can measure your vitamin B6 level, and see if where they should be. If these levels are too low, well, we can give you some supplements to bring them back up. If you've got good levels, then whatever you're doing is doing well. If you were here, we give a lecture, a whole night lecture on B12 one night. If you're on a vegan diet, you should be taking B12. And the methylcobalamin is the form to be taking, methylfolate is the form of folate you want, and you want the activated form of B6, which is the P5P. So those are actually the forms of those three vitamins that you want to take to supplement with, if your levels are low and you need to supplement. And if you're vegan, you definitely need to be supplementing with the B12, the methylcobalamin there. Insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is one of those holes there. If we're loaded up with sugar, what's happening to the body? You're putting out huge amounts of insulin, and these high levels of insulin are not getting to the cells. The cells are becoming resistant. It puts out more insulin. We're walking down the road to diabetes. Interesting, insulin signaling supports neuron survival. And of course here now we're breaking down that signaling because the cells are becoming insulin resistant. In Alzheimer's, these neurons are insulin resistant, so they're not getting the proper insulin signaling, and so they're not having that stimulus to keep growing and stay healthy. They're kind of pulling back and not working, and they're starting to move down the road toward destruction rather than the road to survival. The insulin degrading, insulin was put out in your blood, but then there's an enzyme that goes around and destroys it. You don't just want to keep building up insulin. Each meal you put out more. And so there's an enzyme there that destroys insulin. And interestingly, that same enzyme that destroys insulin will also destroy amyloid beta. Well, that's good. We want to get rid of amyloid beta that's out there. Maybe it's doing some needed remodeling of a neuron, but then you want to get rid of it. You don't want it to just build up in the brain and make these big plaques that is going to destroy your brain. You want it to do its proper remodeling and get rid of it. But if you've got a very high insulin level, then all of this enzyme is going to be busy breaking down the insulin. It's not going to get around to breaking down the amyloid beta, so you're going to have more amyloid beta sitting around. So you see, too much sugar is driving this process here. And we've talked many times here about AGEs, the advanced glycation end products, where the sugars are sticking on the proteins. That alters the proteins, and so your body's immune system can be triggered by it, and we get an autoimmune disease, inflammation here. And of course, inflammation really drives this process of degeneration. There's some special receptors here for AGE that actually trigger inflammation on their own. And of course, AGEs damage the arteries, which cause a leaky blood-brain barrier, and toxins and things that aren't supposed to be in the brain can now leak in the brain because we've damaged the blood-brain barrier. And of course, AGEs is one of the main factors driving arterial sclerosis, hardening of the arteries. And as we decrease the blood flow to the brain, we're decreasing all the normal nutritional support that the neurons need to build all these synapses. And those are one of the factors that drives, let's say, well, we don't have enough nutrition to support all of this, let's turn off, get rid of some of those and stick to a few others. So, again, what do we want to see? Again, we got it down, we're measuring the fasting insulin level, it should be less than 4.5. Your hemoglobin A1C less than 5.6, fasting glucose 70 to 90 range there. So again, if these are not in this range, you've got some degree of insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, or even full-blown type 2 diabetes, then we need to turn that around. And we've given whole lectures on how to reverse diabetes, how to turn this around. The bottom line is we don't eat a lot of sugar and keep pushing the process in the wrong direction there. We've talked briefly about inflammation. There are some blood tests that can measure inflammation specifically. They call a high sensitive CRP. An albumin globulin ratio is usually done on most every general or comprehensive chemistry panel. The more the globulin is building up, then the more inflammation is going on there, because the globulins are primarily antibodies that are attacking something in the body. Your ratio of omega-6 to omega-3s is also interesting to look at there, because if you get lots of the omega-6 to just a few omega-3s, then you're going down that road of inflammation. Interleukin-6 is a specific cytokine that's one of the signalers of inflammation, as is tissue necrosis factor alpha. And again, you don't want those levels high, because that says some bad inflammation is going on in the body. So if any of these numbers are off, then we need to look at ways of reducing the inflammation. What's causing that inflammation? Why is it there? What can we do to turn that around? We were mentioning vitamin D earlier this evening, vitamin D3. Vitamin D3, the doctors call it 25-hydroxycholecalciferol. That will be the name of the blood test for vitamin D3. And you want that in the top end of that 50 to 80 range, 60, 70, 80, in that range there would be excellent there. If it's not, take enough vitamin D3 supplements to get you up into that range. If you're down in this range, that's a hole in the roof. These holes in the roof are adding up here. Hormonal optimization. Thyroid hormones, they turn on the thermostat of the cell, the throttle, the speed at which it makes energy. And the TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, you want that low. If your thyroid levels are too low, that's going to be high, trying to get more thyroid out the body. So that's our first. Most doctors just measure a TSH, but really we'll get much better information if we look at the whole profile. T3 is really the active form, the free T3, the T3 that's free and floating around in the blood is the one that's actually going to the receptors and turning the cells on, and we want a certain amount of that there. Reverse T3 is actually sort of an anti-T3, and it actually blocks the normal function of T3, so we don't want that too high. Some people do a ratio of free T3 to the reverse T3, and we want at least 20 times more of the free T3 than this reverse T3 going on there. And free T4, that's the more inactive form that you make a lot of, that's put out from the thyroid gland. T4 gets made into T3 as your body needs it. Again, if you're low on thyroid in these areas, your doctors will prescribe levothyroxine, Synthroid, for you. This is T4. And so when you take this every morning, you're taking T4, and your body will make the T4 into T3 as it needs it to get your levels, so your actual free T3 is right where it needs to be, so we've got all the cells optimized and running where they're supposed to be. Because we know if they're not, this is one of the things that will move us towards cutting that amyloid precursor protein in the wrong place and making the amyloid beta more extensively than it should be. Under hormonal optimization, estrogens, progesterones, testosterone, we want all of these optimized there. Estradiol, that's estrogen, activates the alpha secretase. This is the enzyme that cuts that APP in the right place to make the good ones that go out and support your synapses. So you need your estradiol there to be cutting that in the right places. If your estradiol levels are very low, then it's not gonna be putting this out and activating it and getting it in the right places. Here's some appropriate levels for estradiol, progesterone, and the ratio of estradiol to progesterone there. And for men, of course, we wanna be looking also at the testosterone here, total testosterone, and the free test. Most of the testosterone is bound up to proteins that carry, a little bit is free, and to go to receptors, and we wanna optimize those. With age, we all decrease these levels, and we'll need to move. At menopause, these levels significantly decrease for women. For men, it's more of a gradual decline, but still, they should check your levels. If your levels are not optimum, they can boost them up. For men, there is either a cream or injections to get the testosterone. For women, the estradiol, the progesterone comes in pills. This brain right here you're seeing, here's normal. This brain over on this side here is a woman who had ovarectomy. In other words, she had surgical menopause. They took out her ovaries for some reason and did not put her on hormone replacement therapy. And you see the activity of the brain here from normal, what's happened there. So this effect of not being able to do this, we are moving down this road of neuronal destruction and lack of proper brain functioning.
Why do they take you off? Then why do they take you off the hormones after
I would
surgery?
find a different doctor. Unless you've got cancer, and estrogen sensitive cancer, the doctors, the smart ones, are putting people on appropriate hormone replacement therapy. I know that's the big fad to not do that kind of thing. It's flawed. I went to a seminar where they went study after study after study showing where the flaws were in those ones that we're trying to, and showing the sum of the science, showing the benefits and the absolute necessity. If you think about it, God designed your body to run a certain way, and when you take away those hormones that were always meant to be there, it's not gonna work as well. And we start getting various forms of degeneration. I mean, who is healthy? The young woman with normal estrogen levels, or the old woman who's lost all her estrogen? If you think, in other words, the lack of hormones. Hormones tell cells what to do, whether it's testosterone, progesterone, and on and on and on. We have dozens and dozens of hormones. If you don't have those at optimum levels, things aren't gonna work optimally. And so this hormonal optimization is gonna be part of staying away from Alzheimer's. As we don't support these things, the body is at very high risk to move down this degenerative road to Alzheimer's disease.
Doctor, where do men get estradiol?
Where do men get estradiol? There's an enzyme in your body called aromatase. And aromatase turns testosterone into estradiol, and it can go, it's a two-way enzyme. It can take estradiol and make it into testosterone. And God designed these enzymes and everything in the right amount. Women should always have a certain amount of testosterone as well, and men also need a certain amount of estradiol as well. Estradiol really helps memory at all stages. You lose your if you've got zero estradiol, you're going to have a very difficult time forming, making, and keeping memories. It's absolutely essential in those circuits of the brain to have that. So, men, you got to have some estradiol too. Good news is you've got an enzyme that'll make it for you out of the testosterone.
Okay, thank you.
Still on hormonal optimization here. Cortisol, pregnenolone, and DHE are things we need to look at there. Pregnenolone is sort of the master steroid hormone in the brain and the body. It's the precursor that's made into the things that are made into the other things and all that. So this is where you start, and from here you go down and make most of the other steroid-based hormones. Cortisol and DHEA are actually both made out of pregnenolone. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Now you need a certain amount of cortisol every day. It's a normal part of life. Under stress, we often make way too much cortisol. DHEA is sort of the counterbalance of cortisol. Cortisol will tend towards move the metabolism towards storing fat. DHEA will move it towards burning fat. Cortisol will tend to break down muscle, DHEA will tend to build muscle. And because of stress, most people have an overabundance of cortisol and a major deficiency in DHEA. If this is really high, we need to be moving down this road and counterbalancing it with proper levels here. We've got a lot of these to cover here. We're going to kind of move quickly through to get the idea. And I'm going to give you the reference, the book at the end where you can get all of this in much more detail. If you'd like to look at zinc and copper, zinc's very essential in the body. We also have copper there, but if we get too much copper and it overbalances the zinc, that has been connected with Alzheimer's disease. So if we measure your levels and your free copper right here compared to the zinc, this copper zinc ratio is too high on the copper end, then we need to do that. Zinc is best measured in an RBCs. We have a much more accurate level of what's inside the cell by looking at the RBC rather than the serum zinc level there. Magnesium, absolutely essential for so many functions in the body. And again, this is one of the things that is essential for proper functioning of the brain. And magnesium deficiency is one of the factors we know that will increase our likelihood of getting Alzheimer's and building these plaques up in the
5.4
brain
to
right here.
6.5.
Again, you want to measure the intercellular, not the serum. The serum magnesium is very worthless. 99.6% of your magnesium is inside cells, but they can do an RBC, the red blood cells in your blood, draw a blood sample, measure the magnesium in the RBCs rather than the serum, and we get a much more accurate of what your intracellular level is there. Selenium, another important one. Selenium is used to reconstitute recycled glutathione, which we need to get rid of free radicals, these inflammatory, oxidative damage things that are damaging structures in the brain. We want to have this functioning well. We need selenium to do it. And again, we need the proper selenium level. If you're low, we can supplement with selenium to help get your glutathione levels back. Heavy metals, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, all of these are very toxic to neurons in the brain. We can test for those. We can find out what your levels are. If you've got significant levels, we can go and do certain measures to try to control those. For mercury, we can remove mercury fillings, try to avoid mercury in our system, and we can actually do chelation therapy to try to remove some of these if you have high levels of those. Just jumping ahead, there's more, we won't dwell on them as much detail. We'll want to know about your cholesterol and your lipids, your vitamin E level, your thiamine level. Do you have leaky gut syndrome? In other words, the microbiome in your gut is very important for the brain. There's been whole books written just on the connection between the microbiome and the brain. If you've got a leaky gut, if proteins are getting into your bloodstream that should not be, those trigger immune responses, inflammation, and that's going to be a problem. Blood-brain barrier permeability here, we mentioned earlier, but again, if stuff is leaking in the brain that shouldn't be there, we've got inflammation and autoimmune diseases going on there. Gluten sensitivity seems to be a big one for many people. Autoantibodies, again, when you're against yourself. These are different tests. There are tests for these. A lot of these are not commonly done tests, but they are available tests. And a practitioner that understands this can go and actually order these tests and see if this is something that we need to be dealing with here. And if that's one of the holes that shows up in your thing, then plugging that hole can help move us towards straightening it out. Mitochondrial function, your body mass index should ideally be 18 to 25. If you're over that, we can do various things between exercise and diet to make sure we're moving back to the optimum weight there. And so we end up here, how many holes do you need to patch? You know, if you've got 27 holes and you plug 25 of them, you're probably going to do just fine. You may not be able to fix all of these various factors, but what he does in his program, he measures all of these things, and they do everything they can to plug every hole that they can. And he's been very successful about actually turning around, because they've actually looked at what factors caused this shift, where we're cutting up this amyloid precursor protein in the wrong way, making amyloid beta and destroying the brain. By doing that, we actually can turn this balance around and stop making that there. And now we come to the really fascinating part here I wanted to give you. I just think this so great. And that is the role of sleep. We talked a lot about sleep last month, but we didn't really touch on this one. In your brain tissue, there is a lot of cells besides neurons. There are cells called glial cells. Now in this picture here, there's a neuron going here with its axon. But around it here, there's all kinds of other cells. And these glial cells in here, see all these little star-shaped things with all these projections, and they go down and have attachments on blood vessels, and actually almost completely encase the blood vessels in a layer of attachments here. All of these are supporting these neurons. Their whole role is to help and support the neurons there, and they play a huge role in this next process of actually deep cleaning the brain and removing stuff. Here's another picture taken a little bit different way. Here you can see some neurons here, and then here's another neuron, and then all of these other glial cells in between here that are supporting those neurons there. And the process of deep cleaning that these glial cells are going to do for your brain is like a power wash for your brain. Happens every night when you go into that deep non-REM phase of sleep, the slow wave sleep. Remember from last week where we talked about the architecture of the sleep cycle? Remember, you go down to these really deep 3 and 4 stage sleeps here for the first part of the night, spend a fair amount of time, number of hours down here in these really deep stages. This is the delta wave, these really slow pulsating waves. They start in the frontal lobe and they spread across the brain to back, just this continuous pulsing during this deep, slow wave sleep. This is where you're actually transferring memories from the hippocampus up to the cortex to make them permanent. If there was something that happened today you really wanted to remember, if you try to remember it, your brain is going to actually, while you're sleeping, is actually going to take that up and store it in some synapses in the cortex up here. But this stage right here is where we do the power cleaning, this deep stage of sleep right here. Now here's a little diagram to help us understand how this power wash takes place every night during your deep stage sleep. Here's some neurons here, but you notice around the neurons are these glial cells. And they're attaching everything. Here's a little artery going through the brain. Here's a little vein going through the brain. And you notice there's a little space around the artery and a little space around the vein right here. And these glial cells actually have like a coating, almost like when all the little foot pads touch right there, it's almost completely encases that artery. And there's actually produced here a clear, we call it cerebrospinal fluid, just like water. It's a watery-like fluid coming out from the blood vessel formed here. And it circulates around the spaces between here. And it can be absorbed over here and taken away here. Now here's the really neat thing. When you go into that delta wave, really deep levels of sleep, these glial cells shrink. They shrink 60% of their size. And now there is a huge amount of space here, and the water just flows through here and out here. An example, if you can imagine a city with all of its cross streets and everything, and every night at midnight, every building in the city shrunk 60% of its size, and you had these huge white spaces between them, and then fresh water from a freshwater source flooded through the city streets every night, power washing and washing out every bit of debris and dust and contamination and pollution, washing it all out into a drainage river on the other side. That's what happens in your brain every night during this deep phase sleep. It is just the most amazing cleaning process here. So I've got a sequence of pictures right here. Couldn't figure out how to embed the video, so we got these here. But you see the brain, these little black dots are like the beta amyloid. So let's say some beta amyloid was being made. Remember, there is some being made every day as part of a natural process, but it's just a little bit and it's in balance. Of course, all those other things might make us make too much, but the important thing is washing them out, getting rid of them every night. So as the process begins, here we've got now this flood of clean cerebrospinal fluid coming out here, starting to wash around the cells, starting to wash out that material. And as it progresses, it keeps flowing through the city, through all the cavities and spaces. Remember, these cells shrunk 60%, so there's huge amount of space. There's a large amount of flowing going through here, and it's all being flushed out around the veins there to be washed and absorbed into the veins to be washed out. And here we see it, the waves have washed over. Look what's happened here. We've pretty much cleaned out all the space around there. So what happened to all the amyloid beta in here? We just washed it out. God knew we needed to clean that out, and he designed every night a good 3 hours power washing of your brain to get that all out of there, so you could continue to have a clean, fresh, undiseased brain that can continue to support and maintain your memories forever. Really, God designed the brain to live forever. Neurons are designed to live forever. Many cells in your body are replaced and recycled. Neurons are really meant to stay there forever. We might change the synapses, build more synapses, we might take off synapses, but the neurons were meant to stay. %20 increase in waste expulsion during deep, slow wave sleep. This is all of that amyloid beta. 20 times already just being flushed out of the brain during that deep delta wave sleep cycle here. Absolutely essential for a healthy brain to do that deep power wash every night. Now, I want to do just a brief review in closing here of something from last week. Remember, we talked about adenosine builds up in the morning, gets higher and higher and higher till bedtime. This is making you feel sleepier, sleepier, sleepier. And then the adenosine is actually what is helping you to go in and do all of those active processes at night, to go into those sleep cycles. So it's that adenosine that is actually telling all those neurons, making them do the sleep thing. And remember caffeine. Remember, adenosine looks like this, caffeine looks like this. Notice the similarity. Caffeine blocks the adenosine receptors so they don't work. You don't feel tired, that's why you get that big sort of energy boost from caffeine. But all of that sleep cycle stuff you were supposed to be done won't happen because your adenosine isn't there to make it happen. Remember this picture? Here is a brain on adenosine. That's normal adenosine firing there, making all of that neurons do their sleep cycle stuff. Here is the same brain after a Starbucks.
Yeah.
What happened to all that adenosine activity? It's gone. I mean, the individual probably feels awake and alert, but what's going to happen? Is he going to get into his deep sleep?
No.
See, we needed this deep sleep cycle right there. And what happens to this deep sleep cycle under caffeine? Okay, here's the sleep cycle under caffeine.
It's never
Where
reached.
is that 3 and 4 stage sleep right here? A good 3 hours of it here to start the night off. It's not there. So you're gonna get a power washing here?
No.
No power washing going on here. Any amyloid beta you make just gonna sit there. Coagulates, form a little oligomers, start sticking to the other ones, and we're gonna end up building beta amyloid plaques, which will lead to eventually destruction of the synapses and destruction of the neurons and as it progresses to full Alzheimer's disease. Do sleeping pills help? No, sleeping pills shut off the brain, they just sort of turn it off. It's not doing that deep sleep, it's not going into delta waves, and you're not getting a power wash with a sleeping pill. You need normal brain sleep, not a sleeping pill. Sleeping pill will not work. And if you're taking a glass of wine, same thing. You're shutting down the brain, you're numbing it up, you're putting it, kind of turning it off, but it's not doing normal sleep cycle, and you're not getting the power wash. So if you're not getting the deep cycle sleep, you are not cleaning out the amyloid, and it can all start just building up here in the brain, and everywhere it builds up, it makes one of these little plaques where they all stick together. We've got a problem. That neuron is gonna die. All of this information about this deep cycle cleaning came out of that same book I told you about last time by Matthew Walker. If you want to read more about that, he goes into that here. Fascinating stuff. And everything else I've been sharing with you tonight from Dale Dresden's book here, The End of Alzheimer's. Fascinating read. Both of these books just came out last year, 2017. And both of them I highly recommend. It's really very powerful information and can make a huge difference for you. So there, we made it through all the material. Is that exciting? If there's anybody here that isn't on the Secrets Unsealed mailing list, I write an article in there every time they put out one of their newsletters. I have some cards here. If you're not on the mailing list, if you'd like a card, I can get you one here. Just fill it out and give it to me tonight.
There should be an X in the
Give
top right corner.
this to everybody that would like a card.
Yeah.
So just hold your hand up and she'll get you a card there. And just fill them out and give them to me before you leave, or give them to Galena before you leave. And we'll see that you get on the mailing list, and you'll get, I have an article in there every time we put one out. And
Right here.
Thank you so much, Dr.
And,
Teske. We just love having you.
this is important cutting edge information that you're not going to get anywhere else. Most doctors don't have a clue that Alzheimer's is reversible. They'll prescribe 2 different drugs that have been approved. Neither one of them reverses Alzheimer's. Neither one of them even slows down Alzheimer's. They kind of buzz you, make you a little bit more awake, but they actually progress. But one of the 2 has actually been associated with a huge amount of deaths. There is no drug therapy for it, but as we pointed out, this complex look at, find all the holes, patch all the holes, and we can probably make really good results. He's been doing that patient after patient after patient. It does work when you find the cause and treat the cause, we can get somewhere. So
Here's your tickets.
there's your information.
Thank you so much. I want to ask all of our crew to come up here tonight, so we want to recognize the ladies and gentlemen too that have been working so hard to put this program together. Rosanna, you guys, Yvette, you guys come on up. I want everybody to be recognized.
No.
Margaret.
That's what you said to do. The X on the upper right corner.
Right, I know, when they're done with the program.
This is the end of our 6th season, and like I said, a lot of hands go into putting this dinner together, the program
Ask her
together.
if I should end it now.
We've added Becquerelli's, we're so glad to add them to our team. Actually, we've already scheduled Zakari to come back in January. Mark it on your calendar. In January, we're gonna have pho. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna have delicious Vietnamese soup.